Base. Okay, and we are at that Mishnah, and today we have one really wild gears to change from the Grua. Gonna hand it there for that one. We'll get to it in a few minutes. One cannot take truma from a one type A, on something which is not its type. Being Torah, if you did take truma, ain't truma so truma. Now, this is very broad definitions here. Kol min chitim, any type of wheat, no matter what grade, no matter what color, no matter what type, echad, it's all the same. Kol min tainim, all types of figs, no matter what type, no matter what grade, echad. Tainim u'grogos v'dvelo. If you have figs which are fresh, dried figs, and pressed figs, right? There are three different, steps in the drying of figs. Tormi mizel echad, they're all one, but tormi mizel zeh. Kol you can take truma from one or the other. Kol makom sheish kohen, any place where there's a kohen, tori min hayofer. You give the kohen from the good stuff. Kol makom shein kohen, if there's no kohen around, you have to keep the truma around until you're a kohen. You find a kohen. Tori min hamiskayim, you take from the stuff which will last. Regardless, so elam tori miyaf min yaf, you always take from the better stuff. The Torah batzol katan sholet, you rather should give a small whole onion, avalo chatzi batzol gadol, but not a half of a large onion. Here too is Yishu's miskayim. A small onion will last longer than half a large onion, even though of course it's smaller volume. Remember, Loki ela b'chatzi gadol. Rabbi Yehuda, of course, consistently says you give half of a large onion. The Chen Rabbi Yehuda said, Tormi b'tzolim mi b'dei Medina. One takes b'tzolim, onions which grow out in the hinterlands, which are larger, but not as which grow in the near closer to the cities, which are larger but not as long-lived. On those which are from the villages, which are smaller but which last longer. But you don't take from the small ones, even though they last longer, on the B'nei Medina, on the ones which grow in the cities, which are larger, because politicians eat large onions, which are going to rot quicker. Must be a message in that. So politicians mean, of course, significant people. So therefore, he says that you give that which is more significant, that which the politicians eat, and that is the larger onions, even though they're not going to preserve as well.
And this how long it takes to find like grapes, raisins,
everything, yeah. Grapes, and we're going to learn about that in detail.
Is it the first time that root has been used?
Yes. First time, I don't know, it might be the only time for all I know, yeah. Yeah, I don't remember any other place politicians. Rabbi Yochanan, Mishur b'shem Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Yanai. Ze'echad v'shlosha v'drashos. This is one of the three midrashos. Now we're on Yud Gimel and Aleph. Shem b'chuvar Torah, one of the three midrashos concerning Truma, which is clear cut in the Torah. What does it say? Kol chelev yitzar. Any of the best of the olives, the chol chelev tirosh v'dogan, any of the best of wine and of grain, the gomer. What's the purpose of this drasha? Im l'lamed shehein tormin. Now, shehein is like ain. It teaches you're not allowed to take truma minat tirosh ala dagan from grapes on grain. Minat dagan tirosh, and from grain on grapes. That's pashut. Right? Tirosh v'yitzar shein shnei mine ilon. But because if it says that tirosh and yitzar, which are grapes and olives, which are both fruit, you cannot take trumas and maisas from each on the other. Heavy duamar, and if you're going to say tirosh v'yitzar shem yichanim sheishtei mina ilon, tirosh and yitzar, grapes and olives, even though they're both two types of they're both trees. A Torah Meister says that nonetheless you can't take truma from on each other. Kava chomer, it's obvious, right? Everything else is obvious, right? Because why it's obvious? Because two types of tree are not kilayim in each other. But you can plant olives and grapes in the same grove. If nonetheless you cannot take truma from one on the other, that means that, of course, anything which creates kilayim with each other, you certainly can't take truma from one on the other. So therefore, certainly two types of grain, one on the other, which is kilayim, not kilei akarim, but kilei zroim, is forbidden, and so too two types of vegetables would be forbidden, right? So kavachomer shnei marbe shnei minei dogon. Now I don't know if you have this, but kavachomer shnei marbe. Let's see what is in here. No, it's not. You have afani marbe shebedogon shnei minim shebetvua shein tormin to yeah. I have kavachomer shani marbe, and the Gemara it says by you it says va'afani marbe, right? Va'afani marbe shnei minim shebedogon, two types of grain, shnei minim shebetvua, two types of tvua is another type of crop. Shei terim meiser mizel zeh. Of course, you can't be terim meiser from one on the other. It's obvious. Kol min chiti mechad, right? Now you have kol min chiti mechad. He takes that out. All right, the Kavanaki takes it out because it's not really relevant. L'chein tzricha. So therefore, what do I need to tell us? They now have to take truma from Dogon and Tirosh, or from Tirosh and Dogon. It's obvious. You can't take from Dogon on Yitzhar, from olives or grapes. You certainly can't take from olives on grain. So it has to tell us afilu me'agron, meaning from light colored wheat al shmutis on. No, I was right the first time. From light colored wheat on dark colored wheat. I mean shmutis al agron, and from dark colored wheat on light colored wheat. So now it's going to tell us not only stuff which is kilayim is aser. Obviously it's aser, right? Because even stuff which isn't kilayim is aser, because we see that from grapes and olives. But even two types of grain, even both are wheat, but since they're two different types of wheat, it's aser. Okay, that's what the extra pasuk of not being of Tirosh and Dogon is coming to teach us. Okay, call me to Teinim Agrogos v'chulei. All you don't have that header, I assume, do you? No. Okay, call me Teinim Agrogos v'chulei. Tani, we learn Tormim Teinim Agrogos. One is allowed to take truma from figs on dried figs, b'minyan, by count. Now this is an advantage for the Kohen. Why is it an advantage for the Kohen? He's getting fresh figs, by the same count as dried figs, upon which the truma is being taken. Fresh figs are obviously more volume, right? So therefore he's actually getting a larger volume than he would otherwise get. Okay? It's true, were he to dry them, they'd be the exact same shiur. But now he's getting more volume by getting fresh figs over dry figs. Okay? So don't worry. This is talking about Truma. Oh, that's a good question. It's talking about Trumas Meiser. Right, but Truma Gedol you wouldn't count. That's right. It's talking about Trumas Meiser. Now, Avalo Teinim ala Grogros al Teinim b'mida. If you take vice versa, if you take from the dried figs and the fresh figs, then you go by measure, and that also is an advantage for the Kohen because he gets much more, right? Because if you go by volume, so the little volume of dried figs certainly is already the same amount as fresh figs. And here you're going by absolute volume, so the Kohen's going to get far more of the dried figs than he otherwise would have gotten had you gone by count. So you always go to the Kohen's benefit. And therefore, you cannot do figs on fresh figs on dried figs based on volume. Below grogros alteinim b'minyan. Nor can you do dried figs on fresh figs according to count. Okay, that's all Tanakama. Shimon Gamliel says no. Sale to einim will grogros mean echodhe. He says baskets of figs and baskets of dried figs are one type. The Torah mites from Mizel, so you can take true slices from one. The other Gemara is going to explain that in a moment. Rabbi Yosef said, Abba Yonoitel Aeser Groigros Mona Muktzeh. My father would go by exact count. He would take 10 of the dried figs from their container, out there, which is called the muktzah. That's where they used to dry them. Like, it's not really a container; it's an area where they used to be dried. Al tishim teiner shaval kola, and use that to take the Jewish meiser on 90 figs which were in the basket. Okay, so you go always by count. Now let's go back to explain Rosh Gamliel. Who said you go by baskets. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Savar Meimar. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba wanted to say, okay, you just have Rabbi Yirmiyah, right? Okay, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Savar Meimar wanted to say, this is what Rosh Gamliel meant to say. Atagoya esat tzomuk. You see the dried fig, which literally means shriveled. Kilu tapach, as if it is fully moist. V'nosav salin kimodi inun, and you take the baskets as are, meaning you reckon what it would have been. For instance, you have 5 pounds of fresh figs. And you say, well, let's say dried figs are more dense. So 2.5 pounds of dried figs, it has the same amount of flesh as 5 pounds of moist figs. So it says in Mishkim Leo, you can reckon that, and you do reckon that. In other words, you make an estimate of what the proportion is based on the density, the relative density of the two fruits, that which you're taking the trumos from, and that upon which you're taking the trumos. Okay? So he says, we reckon the relative density. We do take that into account. That's how Rabbi Abba interpreted it. So it says you take a sal, or when Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says you take a sal of tainim and a sal of grogros and one on the other, it means the relative proportions based on what they usually schlep in baskets. In other words, you reckon what the proportion of density is. Rabbi Yoin and Rabbi Yassi Tarvayin Omrin. Rabbi Yoin and Rabbi Yassi both said, they argue Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. They say, Derech hatapuach litzmok. That which is moist shrivels. Vein derech hatzamuk litpoach. That which is shriveled does not become bloated again. Therefore, v'nosiv salin rav revin b'teinaya, and therefore you take large containers of figs. Now that means that Rosh Gamliel meant that you have to take let me make sure I get this right. You say you can't make it proportionate. You can't do proportion. You can't reckon what the proportional density of each of what one vis-a-vis the other is, but rather you have to take the specific amount of figs which corresponds to of dried figs, which corresponds to the moist figs, and vice versa. In other words, I guess what I want to say is that you have to go by minyan. You can't go by reckoning. You have to go precisely by minyan and by midah, whatever's more exact. Well, whatever's going to be more of a chumrah, I assume. But let me clarify that more, because I still don't think I'm saying it well enough.
He's definitely not saying you can only take dry figs against dry figs and moist figs against.
No, he's definitely not saying that. Okay, but what he means to say is rather that you have to take into account, you can't make it proportionate. There must be some measure which is absolute. There are two possible absolute measures. One is to do it based on count, right? Minyan, right? To take count well there. I need 10 dried figs for 90 moist figs, or vice versa. And the other is to do it based on that would be the other way around. I'm sorry, you have to take 10 moist figs based 10 moist figs for 90 dried figs. That would be Lefi Minyan, and that would be to the advantage of the Kohen. Or you would have to do when you're taking from moist figs from dried figs. On moist figs, you have to do it based on volume. right? Because then you'd have to take a larger amount of dried figs to correspond to the volume, because the volume obviously of the moist figs is much larger than the volume of the dried figs. So you do whatever works out to be advantageous of Kohen, like Tanakama said. See, I don't know how he argues that Tanakama wrote that. That comes out to be exactly like Tanakama. What is the machlokas between him and Tanakama? What is the difference?
They didn't have it on us. They didn't mention any claims. Okay. Shiur Kriya Tefa. Oh, so the shiur of the Kriya is one of the Tefa. Keeping the corner on base.
I don't know. I guess I'm missing Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yossi, because there's a line here which I'm not taking into account, and I'm not confused. Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yossi both say Tarvayin Ormin Derech Tapuach Litzmok. That which is bloated becomes contracted. Vein Derech Tzamuk Litpoach. And that which is contracted does not become bloated. Therefore, it has to work only in one direction. You were saying that before. What direction were you saying it works in?
I was just saying that you take dry, and moist figs on moist figs.
Yeah.
But if he's saying strange language, he's saying, he's almost saying that never the twain shall meet.
No, yeah, but you said, you're close, but not quite there. The way now I understand it, he's saying there's only one direction. It's not multi-directional. Tanakama said it's multi-directional, depending on whether you're doing it from dried on moist or moist on dried. You'll either say count or volume, whatever's more chol, whatever's better for the Kohen. He's saying it's not multi-directional. You must take from the moist figs. You must take from moist figs on dried figs, and not vice versa. And when you take from moist figs on dried figs, you have to take based on volume. Okay? In other words, what you do is you take the opposite. You must take from dried figs on moist figs. And when you take from dry figs on moist figs, you must take according to volume. That's the chumrah. In other words, you can only take from dried figs on moist figs, and not from moist figs on dry figs. Why is that? So in that he said, they both said, derech hatapuach litzmok. You can take from dry figs on moist figs, because sooner or later the moist figs are going to become dried figs. So the dried figs are more advanced, right? That's the stage which they're going to reach. So you can take from dry figs on moist figs, but not from moist figs on dry figs, because moist figs vis-a-vis dry figs are not yet at the same stage in the process. Am I making that clear to a certain extent? So that's what he says. Since that which is moist will become dry, but that which is dry has never become moist, so if you take from dry on moist, because the moist would eventually become dry, so they have a common denominator. But you cannot take from moist on dry, right? At all. What?
It's going back a stage.
Right. Because for the truma to work, it would have to be. We look at the commodity which is becoming truma. Right. It won't work even a minion. That's exactly what he's saying. So it's Tanakama holds it works both ways. That's the machlokas Tanakama Shir Gamliel according to this. According to Tanakama Shir Gamliel holds machlokas says that Tanakama holds you always do what's advantageous to the Kohen, whether it's midah or minion, but it can work both ways. They bring in the svara of no, it's a one direction. That which is now bloated will eventually become shriveled, but not vice versa. And therefore, we look at the commodity which we're making truma, and it has to be a commodity. It has to be that the commodity on which we are taking as truma is something which is somehow connected to that which is we're taking truma off of. So therefore he says we can take from dried figs on moist figs, because the moist figs will eventually become like the truma, which is dry. But you cannot take from moist figs on dry figs, because the dry figs cannot be exempted by the moist figs. They are never going to become moist. Okay? So that was the logic.
If you take into account what the Kohen wants, maybe the Kohen only wants moist.
What? Doesn't matter. It's not up to him. The question is what's considered to be the same min? What's a common denominator? Okay, Tamon Tninan. Oh, I skipped. Now, to Mamish Tabi Gimel base. Amla Rabbi Acha said, Kain Rabbi Ila Rab Chon. Yeah.
Is there like an underlying spark? I mean, other than him saying that it doesn't go backwards in the process, does it make like a different min or something?
Yes, but I don't know, because that which is now bloated becomes shriveled. So the shriveled figs are the common denominator.
It's the end product.
The end product is the common denominator. That's what I mean to say, right? So therefore, the shriveled figs can be the truma because they cover all. But because shriveled figs are eventually these dried these regular figs will become shriveled. So shriveled figs can be the truma. But since the moist fig, you can't take moist figs as truma because the moist figs they're of a common denominator.
I understand, but I'm just wondering, does it fit into the concept of min or not?
Yeah, I think so. I think it does. That's my impression. Although I can't tell you for sure. Okay, so Rabbi Acha said to them, to Rabbi Yon and Rabbi Yossi, can Rabbi Ila Rabbi Chon have a nog base? The Rabbi Ila, your Rebbe, used to do it as well. He used to take the truma from dried figs off of moist figs. Okay, it's interesting. And I think in Terumos, he's not called Rabbi Lo. I just noticed that today. He's called Rabbi Elo here. Same person. The Bible is called Elo. Till now it's called Rabbi Lo, and now it's called Rabbi Elo. So my impression is that Terumos is probably edited in a different base medrash. All right, but in any event, Talmud we learned over there. Kibeitza ochlin she'anichu bechamo. You left a beitza worth of food in the sun, v'nismatu, and they shriveled. V'chein kazayis min hameis. You have a kazayis from a dead body. You left in the sun and it shriveled. Min havel kazayis in the velo. You left in the sun and it shriveled. Kadosh min asher. It's in the size of a lentil from a dead rodent. Kazayis pigul. A kazayis of pigul, a kazayis of nosar, a kazayis of chelev. Once they shrivel, harelu toirin. Because we have less kazayis. Even though they're denser, even though all, law of the conservation of matter, it's all there, doesn't help. And therefore, when you eat them, you're not chayiv to pikul nosar chelev as well. What do you put them in the rain and it bloated again? It's maim, then it's tummy, v'chayov in a lemir chayiv. The ones from the south said, as long as there was kazayis there to begin with. That sheet is understandable. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, Tarvai Nami, they both say the fascinating thing. If it bloats in the rain to more than kazayis, even if it didn't start off as a kazayis, it's still mechayiv you in pigul, chelev, noisar, and his tummy. So the absorption of rainwater, which bloats it, gives it the status of a kazayis. It's a very big chiddush. Okay? We'll discuss this. Tamot Tanina. We learned over there yet another Mishnah. This Mishnah is from Menachos. Amrulo. This is a machlokas there, which the Gemara doesn't bring down here. But Rabbi and Meir have machlokas. In Mincha, which had to be made chametz, like Shavuos, they would bring chametz. Mincha, which had to be made chametz. How would they make a chametz? They have to bring in sourdough. Would they use sourdough from the Mincha itself? In other words, would they make some starter sourdough from the Mincha itself, part and parcel of its dough, or they bring sourdough from somewhere else, sourdough which already existed, in order to ferment the mincha. So Rabbi Meir says they would bring the sourdough in and of itself. They would make it in that dough. That's Rabbi Meir's shita. Rabbi Yehuda says you will bring sourdough from somewhere else. Now, Rabbi Meir was displeased with that svara. They bring sourdough from somewhere else. Why? Amrulo, sorry, Meir, here it's called Amrulo. He said to Rabbi Yehuda, it's going to be too much or too little. There's a precise amount of flour which has to be in the mincha. In Yisaro and Solis, right? The 43 and 3/5 beitzim. If you bring the sourdough from somewhere else, that perfect amount will be skewed, says Rabbi Meir. Why is that? Man Amrulo, who's the one who said this? Rabbi Meir. And we explain what's his objection. Pa'avim shasa or yafe. Let's say you have really good sourdough. Really good sourdough is really strong. So in proportion, you're going to have more water to sourdough in that portion where the sourdough is, because you don't need that much sourdough because it's very strong. If you have really good sourdough, you'll need less. So therefore, that's going to skew the amount of flour you have in the mixture. Why? Because you're going to have less flour in the sourdough than in the rest of the mixture, the rest of the batter. You understand that to see that that's true? So the sourdough is so effective, you require less dough, more water. So therefore, in that spot, you're going to have ultimately, you're going to have less than enough. When the entire mincha is result, you're going to have less than enough flour. Okay, that's one problem which might have been. Sometimes the sourdough is very effective and it bloats up. So a little bit more of the water goes a long way. The sourdough goes a long way, and therefore you have more water. But where to have been the actual material from which the rest of the mincha is made, meaning the other flour, I said smuka. So then it would be not as bloated, and then there'd be more flour. You're losing the flour content by using sourdough. Now that you have good sourdough and it bloats up over there. Were you to take away the water, which is in the bloated part, it would actually be v'niretz chasera. It would be too little dough, too little flour, and vice versa. Sometimes the sore is bad; it's not so effective. So in that case, you'll need more sourdough and less water, and that'll skew the flour proportion too high, right? The sourdough is bad, and it's shriveled. But were it to have been regular flour over there, so that it would have been properly proportioned. Now that the sore is bad sore and it shrivels, you see that place where it's shriveled, right? Where there's less dough. No, there's more flour. Sorry, place where it's shriveled, meaning the sourdough is not as effective. And therefore, it's not going to be good unless you put in more sourdough. So, you see this shriveled sourdough as if it is. No, it's less water. Oh, what do you say? Yeah, you're right. Can you say it again? More shriveled means you need more water. Yeah, the question is the flour content in the dough.
Less
Yeah. Here you're going to have too much flour, right? Because you're going to have to put in more sourdough in order to get it to work. Just for try and figure out how to read into the words. Now that the sourdough is bad, and the amount of sourdough which you would normally use would not be sufficient. because it wouldn't cause fermentation properly. It would be shriveled. So you have to add more sourdough. At roes atzame kilu tavach. So now you're going to have to see that which is shriveling up, as if you have expanded it properly. The nearest Yisera, and you have too much flour. I'm not sure exactly how to punctuate it and translate that, but you get the idea of what's going on here. If you have too good sourdough, so then you're going to have too little flour in the mixture. You have too bad sourdough, you're going to have too much flour in the mixture, okay, because of the amount you'll need. Now, the Gemara, the next 3 lines, the Gra completely changes the Girsa. I think you have a Gra in the back. I don't know if that Shas does, but I know this Shas does. You do have a Gra? Oh, good. Okay, so turn to the very back. Yerushalmi Meseches Terumos goes Birer Ben Eliozal. There are no page numbers in mine in the Gra. It's way back. Yeah, but not in mine. Way back. Yeah, now you're in the right area. Terumos. Okay, no, I have a different. Yeah, I know. I have a different Shas. Ain't Torah Perek Sheni. You're on the right page. Okay, so here it says in the second column, where it says Amud Beis, a little bit further down. Vachi Garcina. The Vachi Garcina is 3, 6, 9, 12 lines down. Okay, it's the 4th word for the end of the line. Do you see that? Yeah. Vachi Garcina is in Rashi script, and the rest of the line says Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish in block print. You have it? Not yet? 10. You have it? Rabbi Yochanan, Rish Lakish, the Tanakh the Rameir, Rabbi Shin Gamliel Amru Davar Echad. Now he says, the Gra says this is the way to read the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, and Tanakh and Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Shin Gamliel all said the same thing. Now what did they all say? Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish both said that, I have to find them. Yeah, that we look at the Gazayas, if the Gazayas blowed in the rain, even though it didn't originally have a Gazayas, that's good enough. Okay? That's Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, and Rish Lakish. We look at it now, Lamaisa right now, it's proper. That's good enough. Okay? That's one thing. Next thing is Tanakh Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda argues Rabbi Meir. Meir is saying, listen, the flour in the mincha is not going to be proportionate. Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't care. Right now, does it look like a mincha? Is the dough a proper dough? So what do I care if it's off a little bit too much, a little bit too little? It doesn't matter to me. Right now the consistency is good, like a normal one should be. So Rabbi Yehuda also looks at the product as it stands right now. Finally, Shin Gamliel looks at the product as it stands right now. Now here, that means that where Shin Gamliel says, when you're taking Trumas and Maasros from Grogros off of Te'enim, you go by proportion. You take proportion. In other words, you look at right now the relative densities. You don't look at Mido or Mishko. Rather, you look at what the relative densities and proportions are properly as they are now. Is that clear? Tanakama held back there that if you're taking off from Tainim and Grogers, you go by Minyan, which means the coin gets an advantage because it's going to get the same number of fresh dates as he would have gotten with dried dates, figs. So that's not proportionate, right? That's looking at as if these are dried and these are moist, and so on and so forth. Rosh Gamliel says, look at exactly now, measure proportionally what the dry to the moist are, and that's how you take off. So all these people hold, says the Gra, you look at Asher Husham, so to speak, as it is now, without taking into account what it once was and what it once might be. You take a look at it right now as is, and that's how you make your reckoning. Okay? Again, Rabbi Yochanan, Rish Lakish, Tanakam, Rabbi Meir, Rosh Gamliel, Amru Davar Echad. That's how he learns the first part of the statement. The second part of the statement is Rabbi Meir, Dromoi, and Rabbi Yossi, Shloshan Amru Davar Echad B'Yasera. Rabbi Meir, Dromoi, and Rabbi Yossi all said the same thing, that you go after its original larger proportion. Meaning like this. Let's take a look at these three. Dromoi was one to argue Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. They said, now, it's if you have something which bloated in the rain, it only works if it had a kazais to begin with. So even though now it looks like more, I have to go look, and now it looks like it's more, I have to look at what it once was, right? Now it looks more. Doesn't matter. I can't look at it as what it is now. I have to look at it as once was. That's Romoi. The next one is, I skipped, Rabbi Meir. That's Romoi is that. Rabbi Meir is the one who says that even though the mincha looks like a Baal mincha now, but I have to look at the underlying thing, right? I have to look at what the flour is. And in order to get at the flour, I have to think, what's in the sourdough? Is it good sourdough? Is it bad sourdough? What are the proportions of flour in the sourdough? So I know to adjust them with the rest of the mincha. So even though now it looks okay, it's not sufficient. I have to go back and make a cheshbon of what it would have been otherwise. And finally, Rabbi Yossi is the one who said what? Oh, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yonah. That's right. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yonah both said that that was the case with Chair before, that you have to take from the dried figs on the moist figs because eventually everything becomes shriveled, right? So therefore you have to find the common denominator of what's going to happen, the smaller shiur, and look at what that's going to be, all right? So you take from the you take from the dried figs on the moist figs based on their volume. Okay. So based on their volume. I don't know if it's on their volume, but the idea is that's the idea. I still don't understand Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yonah properly, but
this din the second sofa.
I still don't understand Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yossi properly, but I understand the principle here. In other words, Rabbi Yonah, that all three of them are saying, I have to look at it not in its current form, in its bloated form, but what would happen if it would shrivel up. Okay, so now let's go over it all outside again. So we have the Shittas aligned, to the extent that we understand them, which I think we understand all of them except for Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yossi, which are that there's two ways of looking at things, as they are right now, or as they could be. Right? So when we line up the Shittas, we see that to begin with, Rosh Gamliel said we make everything proportionate based on our understanding the situation right now. He says we look at it as they are right now. When we look at Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish said it's something which bloated in the rain, even though it was originally gazais, now it's a gazais, we look at it as is right now. And finally, the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that as long as the sourdough vis-a-vis the rest of the dough seems to make a proper consistency for a mincha, that's sufficient as long as right now it looks okay. They all look at it as is. Okay? Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yossi both say no, you don't look at it as is. You look at it as it will be when it shrivels. And therefore you take from shriveled dates on whole dates and shriveled figs. on whole figs and not vice versa. Right? That's the way you have to take the Terumos and Maasros. And then along comes Ramay and say, even though right now it's bloated in the rain, you have to look at it as it would be if it was shriveled up. And therefore it's not a kazayas, and therefore it's not metameyu. And finally, according to Rabbi Meir, even though right now it looks like a proper mincha, you have to look at it as if it was not done, in this apparently good form, but rather what the antecedents of the case are, and therefore it might not be proper. Okay, so that's the machlokas between the two approaches. Right, one of them looks at what was or will be. Right, yes. But one sheet is look at it as it right now is. The other sheet is what it once was or what it will be. Right? The present is really a philosophical statement here. According to him, the present is meaningless. Right? It's like that song that Hove Ekerefayin, right? The Hove is a fleeting moment. So how can you take that into account? It's a big machlokas among the early philosophers, the medieval philosophers, Jewish philosophers. There's a concept of the present. Right. So therefore, there's a whole machlokas where there is a present at all. Maybe there's just the past and the future, but no present. Okay, so that could be the machlokas here as well. All right, on we go. Elin the Debay Bar Pati. Those are the house of Pati. I don't know what Girsa you have. Do you have what the name it? Do you have that over there? Elin the Debay Bar Pati, something similar? Okay, what that we got now? Elin the Debay Bar Pati. Those are the house of Bar Pati. Bashlun Orez, they would cook rice. They cook rice. Intrum Batakti, say, and they forgot to fix it up. Now it's already bloated, right, with water. Chavrayin Savar Meimer Yosef Chai L'Kabel Mavushal. You take that which is raw rice, corresponding to that which is mavushal. In other words, based on what it was, what the cooked rice was before you cooked it. Okay? So, which he says is approximately half its volume of when it is when it's cooked. So, Amar Lun Rabbi Yossi, Af Ana Darko Chai, I'm sorry, Af Ana Armakain. I also they say that. Why? Because Lama Shedarko Lid Poach. Because its derech is to bloat up. Now here's the interesting thing. Here everybody would agree that you take it based on what it is when it's risen, when it's bloated. Why? Because, okay, next Mishnah. Halacha Gimel. Hator means Zeise Shemen al Zeise Kevish. You give from oil olives on olives which are pickled, because oil olives are more. Oil olives are better to eat. Not from pickled olives, and on oil olives. The yain she'en mavushal, give from wine which is not cooked al mavushal, because wine which is not cooked is better. Lo min avushal al she'en mavushal, not from cooked wine on wine which is not cooked. Okay, because cooked wine is worse. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, so we're going to the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, the Rabbi Yehuda. This is going like Rabbi Yehuda. So Amar Rabbi, who says you always take for the better. Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Yehuda. I've got a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda that he seems to contradict himself. The Tzina Tamon, we learned over there that when a Kohen can cook the wine once he receives it as truma, mipnei shumash bicho, because it makes it better. We're on I'm a base now. You down him out because he's mashbiach, makes it better. Rabbi Lezer Amar enu muchlefes. Rabbi Lezer says not a contradiction. Tamon b'kohen. What it means is the Kohen is allowed to cook it if he wants to have cooked wine, but it's not better. On the contrary, it's worse. Therefore, when you give it to the Kohen, you must give it in its raw state, so to speak, not having been cooked. But it actually tastes worse once it's been cooked. Tamontzin, we learned over there, Ein mevashli nyayin shel truma neshim amito. There's a statement that one cannot cook wine of truma because it makes it diminished. What does it mean it's diminished? Because more people are not going to drink it. There'll be less people to drink it because it doesn't taste as good. The other said that it's because some of the volume evaporates when you cook it. We didn't know who said what point. Since Rabbi Yochanan asked the kasha on Rabbi Yehuda that he contradicts himself, Rabbi said he doesn't contradict himself, right? So heavy the Rabbi Yochanan Omar, it must be the Rabbi Yochanan holds that Rabbanan who argue Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says that Yaim Mavush it's possible that Yaim Mavush is better. Because that's the way he understood the Gemara, which said the Mishnah, which says that Rabbi Yehuda holds you can cook wine. The Rabbi Yehuda holds that cooked wine is better. So it must be that Rabbi Yochanan holds that Rabban who argue Rabbi Yehuda hold that cooked wine is worse, and Rabbi Lezer holds that it's consistent all over. Rabbi Yehuda always holds you're not supposed to cook wine because it makes it worse. It must be Rabbanan hold it's nish geferlich if you cook wine. So it must be that if they hold you know how to cook wine of truma, it's not because it makes it worse, but rather because you're losing some of the volume in the cooking process going to evaporate. Again, we're trying to figure out who holds what according to Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda bar Ami Shem Rish Lakish said Mivnei Shemamita Mishoisav, because less people are going to drink it because it doesn't taste as well. Masnisa pliga Rabbi Yochanan. The Mishnah argues Rabbi Yochanan. The Tanya Shingam Liomer Af Min She'enu Mevushal Al Mevushal. It says that you can even take from wine which is not mevushal and wine which is mevushal. That sounds like koshkein. You can certainly take mia mevushal al she'enu mevushal from stuff which is cooked to stuff which is not cooked. So it sounds like cooked wine is better. Says Maram Rabbi Ami lo tani Rabbi Yochanan af. Rabbi Yochanan didn't learn the word af. Since he didn't learn the word af, you don't have the word af in your Gemara, right? But it means it means lo tani Rabbi Yochanan af. He didn't learn the word af. So it didn't learn the word af. It means that specifically, it's not even this, but rather specifically this, you must take from Einu Mavushal and Mavushal, because Einu Mavushal is superior. Okay, let's go back to the Mishnah. Zaklau, this is the general principle. Koshu kilayim b'chaver, anything which is kilayim with its fellow, lo yitro mizel zeh, you cannot take shum from one or the other. Afilu miniyafel right, even from that which is good and that which is bad, obviously. Koshu einu kilayim b'chaver, anything which doesn't create kilayim, Torah minayafel, are allowed to take from the good on the bad, but not from the bad on the good. What if you did take from the bad and the good? Truma, so truma, you're a sinner, but the truma is valid. Except for the poor wheat known as zonin, al-chitim on regular grain, that we have it in that they're not. You can't take truma from one on the other. Bakishos melafafon, squash and cucumbers, min echad rabban hold it's one min. Rabbi Ramesh name meaning it's two separate meaning. Let's go to the Gemara. Alright, Bon Bar Kana B'Shem Rabbi Ila Velosi Suo Love Chet V'Gomer. It says, if you take from the good on the bad, you won't bear a sin. From this we deduce Mashu B'Nesiu Savan that if you take from the bad on the good, you bear a sin. Now, if it didn't work at all, how would you bear a sin? You didn't do anything wrong. It didn't go through. It must be that it does go through. That's our Mishnah saying that if you took truma from the bad on the good, although you sinned, you're no seyavon, but it did go through. Okay, so you see that once he did it, it does go through. Okay, chutz min hazonim v'chulei. It said in our Mishnah, I know you don't have the header. It said in our Mishnah that you can't take from zonin on chitim. Why? Because zonin is a ma'achol behema. It's not a ma'achol adam. Even though it's a wheat which is only eaten by animals as fodder. But were it to be a foodstuff, then it would be valid. And I have here Havi a Truma. It would be valid Truma. Maslish Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. Our Mishnah like Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, it seems. The time Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi and Mishum Aviv, Rabbi Yossi is the same as his name of his father. Tarmi mina yayin l'chometz, you can take truma from wine on vinegar, avalo mina chometz l'yayin, but not from vinegar on wine. Of arvitorim, if you did it b'diavad, truma, so truma. So here too, b'diavad, if you took from a poor grade human food on a high grade human food, then it would work. Rabbi says, yayin v'chometz shnei minimei. Wine and vinegar are two different types of product, and therefore you can't take truma meiser from one or the other. So see, if one is such a significantly different grade, even though they're from the same type, you can't take truma and meiser from one or the other. Shmuel said no. Mistabra makes sense to say yoyde Rebbe l'dvar Torah. The midaraisa Rebbe, even Rebbe holds you could take truma from vinegar on wine. Why? My time the Rebbe. So why did Rebbe say it's aser midrabana? If you say that you can take from the wine on the vinegar, the person will come to make a mistake and say, you can take from the vinegar on the wine, even though that's not Beir D'Oraisa, because that's poorer grade. So if Rebbe made a takana, then it doesn't work in either direction. But hypothetically, it does work, and that's what our mission is inferring. That hypothetically, if you add something which is Meichel Adam, wheat, even of a severely lower grade, it will work to take off truma on higher grade wheat. Hakishos me'alafam v'chulei, squash and cucumbers. Rabbi Kedai to Rabbanan Kedai Ton. Rabbi and Rabbanan both follow the line of reason, which is known to us. The Tzinatel we learned over there. Hakishos v'amalafafon. Squash and pumpkins, ain't kilayim zeh. Rabbi and kilayim, therefore you can take truma from the other. Rabbi and kilayim, Rabbi says they are kilayim. Okay, let's just make aschola next parak. Hatorin kishos v'nimtzis mora. If somebody takes truma off a squash, and then he finds it was bitter, avatiach, he takes truma off a watermelon, v'nimtzas roa turns out to be rotten. Truma, it is truma. B'yachsavitra may have to take truma again. It's truma, but you have to take truma again. Why? Because if he knew, it's ironic. If you knew it was definitely bad, so it'd be truma, he wouldn't have to take truma again. He'd just be a sinner. But here he didn't know it was bad, and it's a suffix. He didn't know it was bad, so therefore we're more machmir than him. And we say, listen, Rabbi Yid, you didn't transgress an Aveira, but we want to make sure you don't transgress an Aveira next time. So therefore, take truma twice, this and another time. Okay? Hatori made a chavitz shel yain. If you're taking truma off a barrel of wine, it turns out vinegar. If you knew it was vinegar before you took off truma, ain't a truma. It's not good. Here they didn't even let it go b'diavad. If it really became vinegar after you take the truma off, I raise the truma to valid truma. If you're unsure, truma, it is truma. The yafsavitra make truma again. When you have two suffix trumas, like the case in our Mishnah, or rather, first the suffix truma, then we made you take off again. So then neither of them is a bonafide, neither of them is considered to be the full-blown truma, that should make it usher b'meduma. Why? Because meduma is only anyway the rabbanim. Midaraisa even trumas bata barov. That which we say concept meduma is only chumra the rabbanan, right? So therefore, that chumra the rabbanan, we don't say here where you have to take off double truma. We the rabbanan didn't give you in place of a double whammy this chumra. Therefore, if each one fell separately into some regular food, it doesn't make meduma, and therefore if you eat each one separately, in chayvel of chomesh, you're not chayv a fifth, the chayin hashniya, and that also applies to the second one. Alright, let's go to the Gemara. Nicha. They're not waiting outside, are they? I didn't see them. I don't think they finished downstairs. They are waiting? They're gone? Alright, so we'll stop here for tonight and we'll start the Gemara tomorrow.